Welcome, folks, on this snowy Martin Luther King weekend. It's just we're delighted to have Lee Rainie with us for the third time. Before I go into a lengthy discussion of his background and get him going, we'll be interested in everything that he has to say. And let's just take a moment for a word of prayer. Loving and gracious God, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for Lee Rainie and the time and the care he's taken to travel and to be with us. Help us to discern in this time of rapidly advancing technology what it truly means to be human, created in your image and called into relationship with one another and with you. Give us the wisdom to question and courage to reflect critically so that our use of technology deepens rather than diminishes our capacity for compassion, presence, and genuine human connection, and does not replace human relationships with one another with relationships to software and technology. Guide us by your spirit that we all learn and choose and serve, love justice and the common good. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Welcome, Lee. As I said, this is the third time Lee has come to be with us and devoted his time freely to us and to Bradley Hills. And I have to say, over that period, things have definitely developed and changed. Lee's background's amazing. He was just telling us in 1999, the Pew Research Center, he wrote, I guess, the position of following and developing the internet and whatever consequences and reactions were involved with internet development. And I think most of us can probably remember what it was like to begin to use or know about the internet. Well, Lee's been there. And not only has he been there, but he followed it very compassionately and closely because he really is a Renaissance kind of person and very spiritual and caring person as all of this happened. And I guess 3 years ago or so, you retired from the Pew Research Center, and the university decided to develop an entire department position for him. And he's now at Elon University and looking at developing the digital future and what that might mean, and following the question of what will humans be good for as AI spreads through societies. So without any further, I don't need to say anything else. Lee's got a lot to share with us, and just so grateful to have you this morning, Lee.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. That's very nice. I come here with a full heart and a sense of blessing sort of across the board. I'm here because of her. And one of the blessings of my life was Courtney when I worked together at the Pew Research Center.
Yes.
And I remember her name before I ever met her was she was a well-known survey researcher who had worked for and got her training in many respects under Andy Kohut, our former boss. And then she left, which is like a disaster day in his life. And he spent however, it's like she's her Moby Dick. It's like by God, we're going to hire Courtney back. And finally, when she came, it was like balloons and confetti. And it was great.
And by the way, I just want to say, Courtney will be in March talking with us about the quality, all the different aspects of surveys and polling as we live in this very uncertain time. And we really appreciate all that you contribute to our church, Courtney. So, yeah.
Good. Yeah, come to that. You will leave the wiser for understanding the world. The other blessing that comes straight out of your prayers. I am the luckiest social scientist ever to walk the planet, because the thing I study has gone through four gigantic revolutions in the time I've been studying it. Nobody gets to do that, maybe economists, but other than that, first there was the internet revolution itself, which merged with the broadband revolution, which at the time we began studying the internet in 1999, hardly anyone had home broadband. It was certain businesses paid a lot of money for getting it, and then it became a thing that was available at homes. And so people became different kinds of internet users when they became broadband users. So I got to watch that unfold. Then came the mobile revolution. So people started connecting to the systems through mobile connectivity, and it changed their relationship with information because they were carrying another brain load in their pocket or their purse. And that was exciting to see. And, very coincident with that was the social media revolution, which, now there's a way to be thinking about that. But in the dawn of the social media revolution, and I've gone back and looked at the clips on this and stuff, it was thought to be a wonderful, democratizing, appealing way for the world to work. All of a sudden, so many people could tell their stories. So many people could connect with each other through different mechanisms. The gatekeepers through the press and other kind of media places had fallen, and the society was opened up in a lot more ways to different kinds of stories and information. Democracy was going to get better, right? On the internet. And then came Edward Snowden, and then the 2015-16 election and the tech clash that we documented at the Pew Research Center became a very prominent thing. But it was it was about 5 years after the dawn of social media that people began to have second thoughts, because the externalities of it were not so good. And then now comes the artificial intelligence revolution. So I literally was going to retire and be retired, whatever that meant for me. But the AI stuff was so compelling and so interesting at a couple of levels. First of all, it's reviving the questions that I was asking at the dawn of the internet revolution. And at the second level is like, these are new things. Tools through the ages have always been things that people created to enhance their physical capacities. They would make us faster. They would make us stronger. They would enhance our capacity to act in the world. So it's physical improvements that we always invented tools for, and there's a lot of need for it. This is the first set of tools that now challenges our cognitive capacities, which is probably why you're all here. We've never faced, I think I said the first time I was here, intelligence is greater than ours, not across the board and not sort of, imperfect versions of it. But there are ways in which now we are being surpassed in intelligence by a thing we've created. And so the big question is, how do we keep it under our control? And how do we help it serve us rather than have it overtake us and replace us, and all sorts of ways like that. So I wanted to tell, Rob Gordon from 2 weeks ago showed some wonderful activities about how AI was working out in his life. And I thought I'd, bring my little show and tell here. One example. One of the things you do when you're an independent and really functionally nonpartisan enterprise, and we learned this at Pew, was that the way you measure success in a world where you're not supposed to move the needle, you don't have an agenda driving your work, you're supposed to ask interesting questions and you're supposed to give relevant information into the broader culture. But with Pew, it was a firing offense at Pew, and probably for my work at Elon, if you express a personal opinion in public, or if you're quoted expressing a personal opinion. So in that environment where it's not, does the funding get approved or not? Does the law get changed or not? Does the world embrace your ideas or not? One of the core measures of success is getting press attention, and now social media metrics and stuff like that. So we at Elon, we're monitoring our press clips after we issue reports. And for the first time last year, when we issued a report I'm going to describe, we were asking experts about the impact of AI on essential elements of human traits, characters, behaviors, and things like that. And we put it out into the wider world. It was a 285-page report, and the easiest way to consume it was as a PDF. So completely unstructured data, completely natural language kind of stuff. And we began to see clips showing up on YouTube of our report. And it was like, I didn't do a lot of press around this, or certainly, camera, video press, but yet these things were showing up with our name in it and my name in it. And it turns out that some clever people who want to make money on YouTube. So it's all about making money. It's not, in many respects, it's not about, driving an agenda, although partisanship is part of it. People loaded our 285-page PDF into a tool called Google Notebook. Does anybody know this? Yeah. They loaded it in, and on YouTube we're showing up podcasts of our information. And here's one that showed up. I'll just play it for you.
Welcome back to the AI Papers Podcast Daily. We have a really fascinating deep dive for you all today.
Yeah, this one is interesting.
So, you sent us this canvassing of all these tech pioneers and builders
Listen
and
to the
analysts
language
from
and the inflection.
2024, early 2025.
Mhm.
And they were asked to look ahead to 2035 and consider what it will mean to be human as AI becomes so much more, advanced and just a bigger part of our times.
Mhm.
So I was sore tempted just to play the rest of the podcast and say that's my act here, but that's an AI generated conversation between an AI man and an AI woman. Yeah. Those were not real people. That was AI generated, but they have been so well trained that these clips on YouTube were getting attention, and they were driving a very modest amount of traffic to my website. But it was essentially just, literally doing what a lot of people now do with language models, is throwing in a big file into it and saying, make sense of it. Tell me what give me the highlights, give me the key themes, give me the Cliff Notes version of this. And I now use this tool a lot just because when I want to read through academic papers, particularly technical papers that I don't really understand, having this, this dumbed down version through this podcast is how I commute now. When I want to listen to highly technical stuff, and it's just delightful. And you gotta, you assume that there are going to be mistakes in it, but the Cliff Notes are probably right, and their descriptions of the highly technical stuff in there probably are close enough for my purposes and things. And so that's the world we're living in. And just to bring you up to date, since Rob was here 2 weeks ago, and in AI time, that's a lot of things can happen in 2 weeks. So just I wanted to bring you up to date on a couple of the major stories since he was here. So both OpenAI and Anthropic, which run ChatGPT and Claude, have put out new services, new applications with a focus on healthcare. And they have fed in as much data as they can. When it's the virtue of these language models, you can feed anything into it. They've got medical records and things that are also being fed into it, and they are customized for health related information purposes. And one of the reasons they did this was because in their analysis of just the content that was occurring on the systems, there were just tons of health queries that were coming into both language models about why these symptoms are showing up in my life. What could it be? I'm about to have this kind of procedure done. What are some of the things I should be aware of, and things like that? So they've now sort of customized health models, health being information and health data about people being some of the most important, precious personal data that people have. And so when we did sort of work at Pew about the sort of different dimensions of data and what people really wanted to protect and wanted to have around privacy, healthcare data, financial data, and data about children were the precious things, and the things that are most at risk, or most that are sensitive kinds of things that people really cared about. So, but now we're entering this age, and of course the question is, when you enter those queries into ChatGPT, they're gonna learn from them, and they're gonna learn from the ChatGPT query. And at the end of the response that you've gotten to your prompt, if you do a thumbs up or a thumbs down, that's figured into the weights of the bottles that are giving answers to the next users of healthcare information. So it's out there. They claim it's going to be protected, and they claim it's going to be, preserved in the right ways under, their laws about how you can and can't use health data. HIPAA is being the big one, but still, that's a new development, and it comes on the heels of last Friday's announcement, not 2 days ago, but 9 days ago. ChatGPT announced that it is now preparing to put ads in the free models of ChatGPT that's going to come out. And when Google taught the world, well, actually, broadcast media taught the world that if you're going to give something away for free, to make money off it, you have to sell something. So the users and access to users becomes the precious thing that people will pay for. So they're going to put ads in ChatGPT, and they're going to go at the bottom of your queries. They're going to show up on the lower right-hand side. ChatGPT promises they're not going to, do a lot of personalization and customization, but if the ads seem relevant from the companies, they'll feed it into there. What could go wrong with that? But it's inevitable because so many of these models now are available for free, and so the line in the internet community is if the thing is free, you're the thing that's being sold. You're the commodity that's, your audience, the audience of people like you is the thing that's being sold. Grok, the Elon Musk language model, is now being investigated by California, the European Commission, the UK Office of Ofcom, which is their media regulator, India, Brazil, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Turkey for a service that it offers called a spicy personality. It's the sex version of Grok, and Grok has now got this, pretty powerful way of generating images as well. So it's what now a lot of traffic, particularly on Twitter, X, Elon Musk's other company, is undressing people. And so getting pornography videos of people who haven't given their consent, just taking pictures off the internet or taking pictures out of people's feeds or something like that, and portraying them in risque ways or even worse. Even though 47 US states have created laws against deepfakes, particularly for the purposes of revenge porn or things like that. This is it's a horrible thing. He's sort of unashamed about it. And so these investigations are now underway in a lot of places. And I assume, eventually a record's going to be built about how they came to decide that this was available and what the rules of the road are for adult users of Grok. So that's underway. Then we've got Matthew McConaughey became the latest celebrity this week to trademark and copyright his name, likeness, and his phrases because it's showing up in language models, and particularly in the video versions of it. So, famous lines of his like "all right, all right, all right," which it was his line in Dazed and Confused, the teen coming of age week. He's trying to trademark that because he doesn't want the models to use them, and he's just the latest celebrity to do that. Sweden has banned an AI created song because it's against the law to create songs on AI and have them sanctioned by the music copywriting authorities. But there are now newscasts by AI anchors. There are songs that are on pop charts that are being created by AI. Microsoft announced it was going to change its relationship and policies as they are building data centers in communities. And this is part of, there's a clear growing backlash in the communities in which there are data centers being built about what that means, and broader backlash about electricity bills that people are suspecting are getting tied to the demands on the electric system that data centers are giving. Microsoft's policy is we're going to pay our way, where you can charge us higher rates to make sure that we cover the new costs we are imposing on the system. We're going to have community outreach sessions. So if there's struggles around this, we're going to help you work it out. We're going to build the data centers in consultation with you, not just shoving them down your throats. But it's part of the clear backlash that's growing at that level of the story. The most famous example is in the 2025 elections. There were public service utility commissioners in Georgia that switched parties from Republican to Democrat because they thought that the Democrats ran on the campaign of, we're going to try to rein in the exploding energy costs in Georgia, because one of the big drivers of it is they're trying to revive a mothballed nuclear plant, and the retrofitting of it is so expensive that they are getting, pretty generous rate increases allowed, and people are just getting hammered by the rate increases that are going on. So that's a little 2-week update since Rob was here. The fun thing that's sort of happened. Well, I'm going to just skip to a thing that I've done just basically for you. I did this I released it to the wider world, but it was this kind of gathering, and I think I talked about it last year. We did this survey that was referred to in the Erzatz podcast about the impact of AI on human traits. So for a long time, our research about AI, we began it in 2014. We did a survey about the thing that was on everybody's mind now, the impact on jobs. And the experts that we consulted absolutely split down the middle. We said, what's going to happen by 2025? More jobs created than lost, or more lost than created? They split right down the middle. Half the experts we consulted and got canvassing from said more jobs lost than created. Half said more created than lost. And so, that it was the big question of the season, and continues to be the single biggest thing that people think about when they worry about AI, but it's not now the only thing that they're worried about. And there's still sort of striking division in the expert community about the long-term impact of the AI, particularly on jobs. There's not anything resembling a consensus, even among economists who do joint discipline studies with psychologists and behavioral folks or psychology or organizational psychologists and things like that. There's still big division on that. But we decided to advance the ball by asking about 12 human capacities and traits. And we asked these experts, and it's a smattering. It's not a scientific survey at all. It's not representative of all smartness on about what's going to happen with AI. But we've got a nice diverse sampling. It's heavy with social scientists, and a bunch of technologists are in it. And we asked about 12 different things and found that the experts on 3 of them were a bit more positive than negative. And we asked these questions: how would AI impact it? And the things that experts were positive about were AI's impact on people's curiosity and capacity to learn. The second is people's creativity. And the third thing is people's decision-making and problem-solving abilities. Now, those are on the high lists of things that people are concerned about. But I think what the experts were trying to say is that as these tools become available, people are going to use them to slake their curiosity, to potentially enhance their creativity, and just to make decisions. I mean, that's a standard issue way that lots of businesses are now using it. And if you think about those 3 traits together, creativity, curiosity, and decision-making, those are the sort of secret, special, high-level skills of leaders. So in a way, and we didn't ask about leadership on this survey, which I kind of regret, but I ruled out asking about it because it just seemed too amorphous to be asking about, and I wasn't confident I would understand the answers. Nevertheless, these experts were sort of saying, under the right circumstances, good leaders are going to use these tools in ways that will help us get out of the woods. The 9 human traits that they were negative about. So AI is negatively going to impact these elements of human capacity, traits, and behaviors. The capacity to think deeply, the metacognition, our capacity to think about our thinking, and whether, ask questions of ourselves, whether we're doing it the right way or what we need to enhance. Social and emotional intelligence, that's surely going to be on the list. Empathy, self-identity, meaning, and purpose in life. AI is going to diminish humans' capacities to cultivate those senses. Trust in shared values and cultural norms, big things in our society. Trust is the glue that holds us together, and the lack of it tears us apart. Individual agency, people's individual sense of agency, AI would hurt that, these experts said, mental well-being, and confidence in their own abilities. So then we followed that up with those exact traits, but with a true scientific representative sample of general public opinion. So we have expert opinion. We've tried to get some general public opinion on all of those issues, just to do a little comparison, even though you don't want to go too far with this because the expert survey is not big and representative in the way you'd love it to be. Anyway, the public thinks things are going to go bad across the board. On all 12 of those traits, they think AI is going to be worse for humans than beneficial to humans. And the most surprising finding, I've been studying this for now, 40, 30 years, 25 years. So I do a lot of surveys in this, and I'm rarely surprised by answers anymore because you just get used to it, right? But it's stunning to me that in this survey, education levels were a strong predictor of people's answers in the negative. Yeah, as I'd studied technology through those three previous revolutions, the broadband revolution, mobile connectivity, and social media, better educated people with college degrees and higher, were enthusiastic. They were early adopters. They could articulate well the reasons why it was going to work. They incorporated it in their lives. They were just and they had a general sense that over time these things would serve society well. In this samples, people with higher levels of education, those with college degrees or more, compared with those who have high school diplomas or less, the better educated are more worried about the impact of AI. And I have theories of the case, but no evidence to back them up. One theory of the case is something that we long see in the polling field, which is the I'm okay, everybody else is hammered point of view, which is people think they themselves can cope with lots of things. And they understand how well adapted they can be and stuff like that. And indeed, some of our surveys at Pew about people thinking the impact of the internet across the board, people thought that their job would survive or they would survive in their job and everybody else would get, destroyed. And it's just overconfidence and over optimism, and also sort of a doleful sense of the society around them. They think people around them are idiots, and God knows we get evidence of that with some regularity these days. And so I think there's that going on. The second thing that when I shared this at a conference, there are a bunch of people who basically came up to me afterwards and said, we think it's that no matter whether these individuals, the higher educated individuals, think it will work out well for them, they're worried about their children and grandchildren. So this is a very future-oriented kind of question. How are things going to break, good or bad? And they are worried in the general cultural commentary around this about all the ill effects that it's going to have. So let's stop there because I know you all have questions.
Okay. We also encourage questions from the chat, whatever. B, you're first.
Yes, excuse me, sorry I'm late. I think I just got me just to say that highly educated people feel like very, very helpful and do it. But the only concern, I guess, is that where the data come from and then the trustworthy, and then how do we know it's real to use the tool?
Yeah, well, the data come from a wonderful history of doing surveys the right way. I mean, there are now well-established ways to do surveys that are as scientific as you can possibly make them. Come to Courtney's session in March and you will learn more about that. So we used a wonderful colleague of mine who runs now the research side of a wonderful vendor called SSRS that has created and now is the Pew survey vendor. And they you can't do phone surveys anymore, really. Some people claim to do it and stuff. Nobody answers their phone. And the people who answer their phone are like curious, highly social, highly civic people who are just like, I wonder what this could be. It's just not the norm for civilization. And And so those don't work, but there are ways in which scientifically accurate, representative panels of populations exist, and we used that there. And enough people do this kind of stuff that you begin to see where the data converge, and these aren't sort of highly different kinds of findings from other people have found. At the time we did this, nobody had asked about these particular 12 dimensions of life that I described, but enough general work, including wonderful work by Pew, on general public attitudes about the impact of AI. This aligns with that. So, I'm pretty confident, and one of the nice things about studying technology over time that I discovered is it's not naturally a subject that people want to lie about. What you worry about in survey work is we were asking questions where the socially desirable answer is different from what you feel in your heart. And they might be dealing with behaviors that you don't want to talk about, like health behaviors, drug use and things like that. Over time, in hundreds of surveys that I've been involved in, the people basically are okay to talk about their tech use and their feelings about technology. Yeah.
Sorry, follow up one more question. How about the images? How can we trust the real?
Oh, well, images, that's it. We did a survey, everybody did surveys heading into the 2024 elections, and in North Carolina, where my university is, we've got a big election coming up this year, and everybody started looking around it. There's just incredible concern about the reliability of images and the information itself. I mean, truth is now a hard thing to figure out. And you see, for instance, just in the capture of the Venezuelan president, the instinct of the bad actors here, and just the commercially adventurous actors here, is start putting something out in hopes it'll get traffic. Because you get a check from Google, or if you've got drawn traffic to the post that you've done, the video you've done that you posted on YouTube and stuff like that. So there are stupendous numbers of information entrepreneurs that just want to exploit that. And we now know that the best way to get people's attention is to go right to the bottom of their brainstem. All the primitive stuff in there, right? It's because they're optimized for the social media in particular is optimized for engagement and attention. And what gets your attention most? Stuff that just annoys you, and the people that annoy you, and the horrible things in the world that make you, just in despair and things like that. So the extra added adventure of AI is not only is it being optimized by the same companies that gave us social media in some cases, it's not only optimized for attention and engagement, it's being optimized for intimacy.
Yeah.
And it's being thrown out into a world where, at least we know in our country, according to our former Surgeon General, there's an epidemic of loneliness. Yeah. So how is that going to work out when we're creating these tools that tell people they're great? Tell people that the problems that they're worried about are exactly the right ones. That tell people that, somebody cares about them and things like that. So not only images, but just sort of the general provision of information now is swept up in this series of mega trends and mega insights about humanity, about how do you keep people riled up and how do you keep people sort of feeling good about themselves, even if they feel real crummy about the rest of the world.
Yeah, Joan, go ahead.
I have two questions.
Question.
You're based at a university now, so you're surrounded by the Gen Zers, right? Their response to all this.
The overlay on all of this is dread about the future.
Yeah, really.
Excuse me, sorry. And it's, jobs related. And so there's a sense that our futures are in peril. And so that then splays out into a couple of things. First of all, it's okay to use AI to turn in your work, to get good grades, to have a good GPA that make you look decent to the people you're going to hire or going to hire you. But there's a lot of concern about this, and they've absorbed a lot of the critiques and the criticism of the culture, more through social means than through news commentary or stuff like that. They just sort of know in their bones, friends whose lives have been screwed up. And they know in their bones when they use it, they've seen mistakes that have been made, and so their trust is very suspect, or they're very suspicious of this stuff. And there's a lot of effort to try to figure out the right way to do this. And so tons of faculty are now just obsessed with that, and their students are sort of right along, riding the coattails of that. And so the sort of philosophy at Elon, which is not unique at all, which is to sort of not suppress interest or not, just totally take it off the AI off the table, but to say we're co-learning how to be with this new kind of intelligence, and everybody ought to share their learnings, because students are learning as much or more than faculty members about this. So there's a really interesting dialogue on campus related to it.
So the second question is related to what you just said. So what advice do you want to give us?
I'm not in the advice business. But
Doesn't have opinions.
I was about.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna be on YouTube saying this stuff. So I think it's okay to basically say you've got to know what you're talking about. So being exposed is sort of a precondition to having an informed view about whether these things work out or not. Particularly like people in this room, you're experts in stuff. You know stuff about the world more than the average person by a lot. And so one great test is to figure out whether AI knows that world as well as you do. And that's and so figuring out smart prompts for that, and then God knows the prompting universe is just abundant now, some of which is generated by the slop that AI creates and things. But it's so trying it out. And I think figuring the thing that's happening in a lot of places, companies in particular, but I think it can work in individual lives, sorting out where you think AI can help and sorting out where you can't rely on it enough to think it helps. So a brand new thing that just exploded over the holidays we've just had is a system from Anthropic, called Anthropic Claude Code. And it's basically turning all the insights that Claude has about coding, which the coding community is like paws up for this stuff, and making it available for all the rest of us who don't code. And it's really good. And so I've used it now to reimagine how to sort my email. And Claude Code has created for me little scripts that my email gets sorted into buckets that I understand and gives me insight. One of the things I'm obsessed about is staying on top of this, which I can't do. But I get enough Substacks and enough news feeds and prompts and things that I kind of have somewhere in my inbox is most of what I need to know about what happened yesterday in my part of the world. And the scripts that Claude Code wrote for me on this are like bulletproof. And I'm learning more quickly, more relevantly than I did a month ago.
So play with it.
Yeah, play with and do that sorting process where stuff that can help and stuff that's is suspect.
I tried a 3-day itinerary for 3 days in Tokyo.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
It was interesting. Yeah, I don't know.
You don't even have to go.
Yeah, we have a comment I wanted to share from Diane Whitaker. It'll take a lot of motivation from humanity to harness the power of AI. It'll transform the world's work and the type of vocations people pursue. Humans, though, will still want to be creative, and I wonder if people will want to cede their everyday thinking to machines. It seems to already be happening, however. So it's like what you're talking about. Oops, excuse me. I thought I'd turn that off. At any rate, I'm wondering about what kind of path, excuse me, do not disturb us off. At any rate,
It's AI.
Yeah, I know. Hey Siri, turn do not disturb on. There we go. At any rate, I had to listen to Siri again. But the legality and the responsibility and how do we, I mean, this whole field has got to be really, really tricky. And as we looked at some of these suicides that have been attributed to chatbots, what do you see? Do you see as far as the legal world is concerned, as our concern about parents have as far as what their kids do? What's
Well, I mean, one of the most interesting questions in the legal world is who do you sue?
right? That's
Who's
what I was
responsible for the
thinking.
tort? Is it the software designer? Is it the
Yeah.
company that promulgates the software? Is it who set the weights on the algorithms and the learning systems on this? Is it the user, themselves? And so, tons of that stuff is gonna get sorted out. One of the most interesting, dimensions of one of the suicides and the family is suing, it's a company that creates bot companions. There's enough going on just with the general models that people are creating companions, but I think it's Replica was the name of the company. And the response, in the exchange of briefs on this, one of the responses from the company is asserting a free speech right. And that humans have ought to have the right to hear what our chatbot says to them. And if you deny them that right, that's a denial of their speech rights. So it's not even opening their mouths or saying something or committing speech, but it's just, but speech is such a highly contested ground now, you can't predict how some judges are gonna react to this. And so that's one of the things to be concerned about. The other thing in the comment was there's now some scholarship, and we're gonna get a flood of it in the next, in the coming years, about what scholars are calling cognitive offloading, which is to basically defer to the chatbot answers for whatever you're doing, the project you're working on, the paper you're writing, the conversation you want to have, whatever. And they did a wonderful, A/B double-blind test of folks, and the people who relied on the chatbots did more cognitive offloading, and you see it in professions too. There are lawyers studies saying that happens to lawyers. There are surgeon studies that saying that happened to surgeons. They are sort of deferring to the chatbot answer because it sounds authoritative. They're not quite sure of their own grounding in whatever they're doing. And so this is a natural human phenomenon. And so that's, we're gonna, and if there's the other argument, which you get from time to time from the AI creators themselves, is if it's smarter than we are and giving us better answers, why shouldn't we take account of that?
Yeah, and this might be putting you on the spot or whatever, but I was thinking when you were talking about how you use your Google Notebook to summarize highly technical things.
Yeah.
I imagine you're commuting and listening to it. And you don't have to answer this, maybe it's more theoretical, but would you repeat in an article that has your name on it, something you heard in there, or would you go and verify? I mean, it's one thing to learn for yourself for background, but it's the idea of perpetuating it and saying, this is my new statistic, I'm going to give in my talks. And again, it's too personal, don't have to answer.
No.
Kind of for the group.
Yeah,
That to me kind of is, because that's what I'll do, is I'll read the summary, but then I'll go to the real document. And I don't know if I'm the only person doing that, or that should become the norm, and we just kind of drum that into people if those real documents keep existing, but and are taken off the internet. So yeah, that's my question.
Anything that comes out with my name on it, I want to check.
Okay.
And I think that's a widespread view, particularly among people who are in knowledge work kinds of circumstances. And then, there's some embarrassing examples already. The lawyers are disbarred now for citing cases that don't exist. And there's now one of the legacies of the social media techlash is that there is a big, almost industrial complex sized community of critics who are at the ready every time a new model comes out every time there's asserting claims about the capacities of AIs to stress test it. And so they're almost in real time in a way there wasn't at the dawn of social media and search and Wikipedia. There are ways now that people are really embarrassed by having bad things and wrong things attributed to them. And AI is sometimes the instigator of that. People sort of cross-check a piece of work with AI and sort of say, no, that's not really what that article said or what that scholar has been saying. So AI is now, you know, on both sides of the battlefield on that kind of stuff. But you know, it's going to be harder over time, to the basic point about democracy, to do the legwork on that, because there are ways, you know, like you do through LLCs and stuff like that, you can launder information through a variety of sources that make it look good or make it hard to verify. And so, well, it's something to put on your worry list.
Bob had his hand
Yeah,
up
just
before,
a
but
quick-
you still have a question?
The cognitive offloading has been abroad in our society for some
Yeah.
time now, and this is where we are.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that. But I want to go back to what you said originally about the three areas where AI is going to improve: decision-making, creativity, and curiosity. And the areas where it's going to degrade deep thought, empathy, values, purpose, those kinds of things. And ask what kind of decisions result from a society that is no longer capable of deep thought, empathy, values, purpose. What does that imply about what does society create of value? What's the quality of our decision making when those capacities are eroded?
Well, sort of back actually your first thought, which is they've been eroding for a while in a polarized society. And so welcome to that journey. I think there's a whole bunch of research to be done on this that I would like to sort of help with the conversation on it. So we're in a society full of crappy decisions in lots and lots of ways. I mean, the stock market, you know, there are bubbles in people's personal lives. They fall victim to quick cures. You know, there are lots of ways that humans run afoul to this stuff already. So I think part of the imagination project you're inviting us on is to look at places that have gone wrong already because of this stuff. To me, the biggest question here is the purpose question. I mean, you know, there's always going to be ways that decisions are, you know, right or wrong or work out well or don't and things. And we're always in you know, a learning set of circumstances on this. And sometimes we unlearn things, or you know, there's another challenge like polarization to what the learning even is in the first place and the meaning of the learning. But the big question is the purpose question. And so the two things on that. I just bought a book that I heard about in a podcast my son sent to me called The New Renaissance and sort of what's next. And it follows on to a wonderful book by a real early AI doomer, a critic, a guy named Nick Bostrom, who's a philosopher at Oxford. And his new book is I think it's called Utopia 2.0, and it's a thought experiment on what happens in a society where every problem is solved. You know, because so much meaning in our lives comes from how we address problems, or how we help people who have problems, or how we ourselves deal with problems, and our mastery of sort of getting back to things. And Bostrom thinks that, you know, we could end up in a Wall-E world. Do you remember in Wall-E, the Pixar film, where the general society, Wall-E, the robot, the higher society, the human society, is just lazy folks who are lounging at poolside, drinking pina coladas, and not thinking about much of anything. And, you know, Wall-E finally helps bring that world back to its senses. But that's the kind of world where sort of people are okay with having the tools solve everything. There's an income issue to be resolved in this. And so the AI community answer is a universal basic income, basically guaranteed income, which is, God knows how we're going to resolve that. But it's the big it's a big question about how we make meaning as in an environment where we can defer to these tools and we can count on sort of they will help us create institutions that are adaptive and beneficial in this brand new era. Right now, if you think particularly about public institutions, that we live in the world of this. They're highly bureaucratized and they're highly rule-based. And one of the big interesting critiques of this world now is we've lost a sense of common sense and how to apply that to everyday problems that people have, rather than filling out 50 forms and consulting 50 things and going through 17 stages to build a toilet at a public facility and things like that. So anyway, that's on people's minds. And I think that's the creative project that we are in as a civilization, for the sake of our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. That's helping them manage this in a way where they will have purposeful, happy, fulfilling lives. That's the money question.
Yeah, wow. Steve?
What kind of predictors did you find in your surveys of higher levels of accurate information about AI in terms of education, geography, education levels? What I'm worried about is that this turns out to be highly elitist.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And particularly the flow of power is to elites, which helps explain a lot of where we are right now, forgetting, the AI mystery future we're trying to think about. There's a lot of interesting scholarship on super predictors. Some of the earliest was done on people who studied Ithiel de Solapool, who was America's version of Marshall McLuhan, a great communications theorist, did a book called Forecasting the Telephone. And he had his grad students, stuff like that, went back through all the predictions that were made about the impact of the telephone, the turn of the 19th to the 20th centuries. You know who the best predictors were? Marketing people. Because they sat at the intersection of the creators and the consumers, and they had to translate between them. And the technologists were horrible and are well known to be horrible imagining how their tools are going to be used. Edison thought the phonograph was supposed to be awesome for business meetings and for concerts and stuff. And so, way out of step there. And there's way over enthusiasm among the actual salespeople. But the marketers were the people who had to figure out the sweet spot of all of this stuff. And so for the telephone purposes, when telephone use started taking off, was when the marketers had figured out the right way to communicate about it. There's also there's a fabulous guy at Stanford named Philip Tetlock, whose social science is based on predicting. And he basically said, taking up from Isaiah Berlin, there are two kinds of decision makers in the world. There are foxes and there are hedgehogs. And hedgehogs know one thing really well, or think one thing really well. So they're given a problem. Think of zealots and ideologues and stuff like that. And just people who have a worldview. They're not crazy people. They tend to fit all problems into how does it match with my worldview and stuff like that. And they're often quite good, particularly when the thing that they're thinking about is aligned with what they really, really, really know. But generally, foxes do better than hedgehogs. Foxes who know a bunch of things well, are curious, never settled on their hard points of view, always sort of seeking feedback, are great at metacognition and stuff like that. And he wrote a fabulous book called Super Forecasters. And it's now embraced in a lot of social science. And one of your controls is inviting people who are known super forecasters, particularly when you're doing future work, to be part of the process. And what they always do, they're Boolean in their thinking. They take available evidence and form a view, and then they're asked the probability of their view being correct. And then they watch new things unfold, and then it's the experiment is cut off at a certain date, and so they've made their prediction. And they say whether the prediction is they're 65% confident of it or 92% confident of it. And the people who are open-minded, who are eclectic in their information gathering processes, who are open to lots of feedback, who are just inveterately curious, are way better than real experts, PhD, highly credentialed folks.
I'm reminded of the movie industry at the dawn of VHS and beta tapes. They were scared to death of it. They thought that it was going to be the death of the movie industry. And now here we are, 35 years later, the movie industry is booming and they've got a gazillion new platforms.
Yep, same with music.
Yeah.
Music was the canary in the mine shaft on this stuff, yeah. But so there are fewer mega superstars,
Yeah.
and many more people making their living off music. And it's based, the final answer maybe is, it's based on interactions they have with other people. It's the groups that are willing to do tours, and the groups that are willing to do, play local gigs and stuff, like have merchandise to sell and stuff like that. Those are the people who are doing halfway okay. And nostalgia always sells well. So all of us going to our, concerts of our 1970s rock stars. It's like.
Ben and then Claudia, and that might be a good question.
Does anybody set out to develop overarching ethical principles as to the use of AI in life?
Yeah. The problem with that question is not that there are not people thinking about, there are actually too many. When we did one of our future reports in the Pew era that I was doing this, I counted 93 or something like that efforts that were currently underway about writing ethics rules. There's wonderful convergence on them. So there's maleficence and beneficence and empathy and things like that that are on everybody's kind of list. And so there are a lot of people thinking about it. The problem is, first of all, how to convince Anthropic and OpenAI and Elon Musk and others to embrace them. And there's pretty interesting arguments about what alignment means. I mean, that's the term of art inside AI communities is alignment, and whose values do embrace. And different cultures have different values, and how do you account for that? And a couple of people have come up with some pretty wise solutions off the start. AI should not probably use personal pronouns. I think this, and I want to be addressed as you. And stuff like that. It furthers this notion that they're optimized for intimacy, right? And a false intimacy, because you're not dealing with a flesh and blood thing on the other side of the screen. But so there are a lot of people thinking about it, and to their credit, particularly Anthropic. I mean, this is their reason for being. The whole reason that their CEO broke off from OpenAI, he was one of the leading stars of that. Was because he didn't think that they were thinking about alignment correctly. He wanted a much more values-based way to do things. He's the one, for instance, that's predicted, all white-collar jobs are going to be hammered, and no college graduate's going to get a job in about 10 years and stuff. So and he's concerned about it. That's why he thinks like that. So yeah, a lot of people are thinking about that, and you'd be comforted by the convergence of what they're talking about. There are a couple of wacky things that are in play, but the problem is getting it implemented. Yeah,
Sure.
Claudia, did you?
Yeah, my head is just flooded with so many thoughts at this point, but, and so I'm trying to not come out garbled because it's just so much. I'll just do kind of quick spots here. 2 future jobs, social media influencer. Whoever knew that would be a job. Okay, I heard that on a couple of people. I don't want to be an engineer. I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be a social media influencer. And then the other one is prompt writer for all of these AI things, because the prompts are going to be and are already seeping their way into people who, I'm long retired. I was a media specialist. I'll do my plug for media specialists, because alternate points of view, alternate resources gives credence to what you are stating. Often resources that don't support what you think. Anyway, so now I'm going to move on to an anecdote. My son was living in Texas, and he had the opportunity to chaperone a high school dance. Nobody's dancing, not one person. They got a band, I remember my high school dances, literally, I danced every dance. I loved it, that was great. So I said, well, they don't know how to dance anymore. And so he says, that's not it, Mom. I said, well, what is it? He said, they're afraid that someone will videotape them and then post it to social media, and they'll be bombarded with people making fun of them. So they don't dance.
That's sad.
It breaks my heart. And in terms of life, I mean, my husband has always greeted people, sometimes to, that he hasn't seen in a long time, and he'll say the same thing, are you happy and healthy? And if we can't be happy and we can't be healthy, what the heck's the point? We also have ethics. We are at a crossroads. This is a huge crossroads in human society, development. There've been many. Start with the Garden of Eden. That was a big crossroad right there. Okay, and we go through history, fire, the wheel. I mean, you have to go way back, professors' way back machine. And it just goes on. And at every crossroad, it had that particular change, Renaissance, whatever, has offered up the potential for great good and the potential for absolute abject evil. And so take atomic power. You can blow things up, or you can create power that we rely on. So it goes on and on and on, and I won't go on and on and on about it, but I think that's where we are right now. We're at and ethics needs to be reinvented.
We are almost out of time, but Michael's had his hand up for quite a while, and we're almost out of time, or out of time.
I'll make it real quick, Carol. Lee, this has been a wonderful presentation. I just wanted to ask real quickly, at the very beginning of your presentation, you talked about the paper that you wrote predicting the future and how you had been very careful not to express an opinion, to try to be, just state the facts, ma'am. And I'm curious if you're feeling pressure now not to be punished for trying to be neutral, because get the impression that people who don't have a particular intellectual axe to grind are being punished because their views don't align with the current administration. Are you feeling any of that?
Well, the lucky thing about this subject is that there isn't sort of heated partisanship around it. I mean, the Trump administration has, very clearly declared that we're in an arms race with China on this, which takes a lot of policy stuff off the table. Because if we lose to them, they have the superpower that we don't, it's going to be doomsday. And so anybody that fiddles with concerns about this, or tries to create guardrails, or tries to set up systems and gets in the way of innovation, is just not going to get a decent hearing anymore in this administration. And they've done that. I mean, he's issued more recently orders preventing states, or saying that the federal government's going to preempt any state that tries to regulate this stuff. So, but still, that doesn't. It's not toxic partisanship as the way so many issues are. So I live in it. I just always, and on this subject in particular, lived in a blessed or a privileged zone where a lot of stuff is just, nonpartisan or pre-partisan. So I don't, it's sort of safe to be neutral because, first of all, there's so many divergent opinions, and there aren't sort of colored red or blue on this, that it's fine to live in this world. And there's a particular sense of, I'm on a campus now, and the administration has gone after some campuses for being particularly out there on lots of things. That is a sensibility that now exists throughout higher education. You don't want to raise your head too high on a bunch of things, lest your grants become. I mean, this is a real existential issue, a survival issue. Your grants get cut off, or other things that matter to you just get taken away from you. And so that, I live with that, and I'm I don't know whether I've trimmed my sails on any subjects I want to study. I mean, it's partly because we're future oriented. So you can factor partisanship into that if you want. But for instance, these 12 human traits we asked about just have no purchase in partisanship. And one of the things I'm strongly contemplating is almost a reverse of the question that we asked about those 12 human traits, how AI would impact them, to ask about human resilience. There's a ton of history, there's a ton of scholarship, there are a ton of scholars who think a lot. There are psychologists in this room, and who think a lot about, sure, humanity has taken its hits, and how does it survive? And my hypothesis going in, which might be, an agenda or partisanship, if you want to infuse it with that sensibility, is that the nature of resilience is probably changing now. I mean, resilience, as I understand it, and I don't know the literature at all well in this, but my sort of lay version of this is bouncing back from a setback. You get back to a state of relative well-being, relative comfort, relative capacity to work in the world after a trauma has occurred. I think the challenge of AI kind of stuff is that resiliency is going to be anticipatory now. It's not even that the trauma has occurred. It's like it's over the horizon, and to be smart about it, you got to think about it and be prepared for it. And like adaptation, just in it's 3 years that ChatGPT has existed. And it's 70 years since AI has been on people's minds, but it's 3 years that the most visible way it affects us has been in our midst. And think of all the change that it's already generating and the questions it's all generating. And so I think resilience is going to be essentially adaptability rather than the capacity just to sort of get yourself back to a state where you felt okay enough, happy and healthy. And so I think that definition is going to probably be in constant revision now.
Yeah. Well, we need you to continue this work because you are thinking and doing and informing us in a way that really, I think, is helpful to us as we feel an onslaught. And we can't thank you enough for giving your time. Before we all clap, and I know we will because this is such a contribution, I want everybody to come back. We have we have a lot of programs, but next week we're going to use AI prompts to apply to Bible study. And we're going to look at maybe the prodigal son and predict what happened with that prodigal son a year after.
And you'll love it. You will love it. I'm telling you.
Yeah, Diane Whitaker and Clint Kelly are working on this, and we want everybody to find out. This is what happens. We're going to and get in there. And then the week after, we have the author of one of the New York Times best books of the year, Kevin Sack, who has written a monumental book that I can't tell you enough. I knew nothing really. I'm embarrassed to know about Reconstruction, but what was the Black church? What was the history of the Black church? And then how was it that Kevin Roof was able to murder the key leaders of one of the Black churches in 2015 in Charleston, South Carolina? But this book got so much depth in it. And if somebody wants to borrow my copy, I've got it online. I'll lend it out, but it'll be a real interesting discussion. But after that, let's get back to Lee and his giving of his time to us. And we just can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
A little help with the chairs. Wow.
Not there.
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah, it was like,